What's up, guys? This is Joe.
And this is Chrissy.
And don't judge us for wearing the same thing we did yesterday because we're filming 2 podcasts back to back.
Oh, I didn't even think about changing my shirt.
That's all right. And welcome to the married life.
Where we believe that it's never too early or too late to have an awesome marriage.
But it is too late to change your shirt because we're filming.
We're already filming. Here we go.
Here we go. So last week we said that this week we were going to hit on the basics of relationships, right?
Yep.
Because you can lose the basics very easily. Because you hit on last week that it's easy to think on dating, right? Because you don't have all this craziness going on. It's easy. I mean, really, every night's almost a date with your spouse before kids. You know?
Oh, yeah. I hear people, we're going on a date. I'm like, didn't you just do that last night when you ate dinner by yourself in your house?
Right.
And then went and had sex?
Boom.
Sounds like a date to me.
In the living room, right? You know, on the kitchen table.
Oh.
Wow. Yeah, now for all the married people out there with kids, you know, like you got to wait till they're asleep. You got to have doors locked. You got to have like a backup plan.
And make sure that door is clicked shut
Always.
and locked.
Always.
I've heard horror stories.
Horror stories. We ain't having that in this house.
I'd triple check that.
Yeah,
mug.
yeah. I got a baseball bat in case, you know, like.
What?
Yeah, they won't remember then.
Oh my God.
People aren't going to listen to us anymore. I'm kidding. I wouldn't hit our kids. Anyways, back to the basics.
Hard.
And we digress. What are we talking about?
We're talking about the basics today, and we made up a little acronym to help you guys remember the basics.
So the first basic B.
Bears.
Bears. Battlestar Galactica.
Office reference.
What are you doing? What are you doing? Identity theft is not a joke, Jim. If you're not an Office fan, you're probably not a fan of this podcast.
Nope. You don't get our humor.
B for Bible, actually.
Yeah.
So Chrissy and I know this, that before we had a relationship with Jesus, our relationship sucked. It was so bad. I cheated on Chrissy. I was verbally abusive. I never struck you. Although one time I think I was drunk and
you swung at me, and because you were drunk, you highly missed.
But was it like a fast swing? Like
well, you were drunk.
Yeah,
so
it was like, you know, like I cocked my hand back
in
and
my
I like
head,
fell.
I laughed.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Like in your head, you laughed. Like
it was the motive.
Yeah. So, and again, please don't think like I'm abusive. Like this happened. How old were we? We weren't even 21. This is like,
I don't know. We were probably like 19.
Yeah. Anyways, so that's a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. But before our relationship, it was garbage.
I was
garbage.
Very emotional.
Oh my gosh! Every time, I mean, she would be crying about nothing, like all the time.
You weren't listening to me.
Crying. I'm like, get it together, woman. You know. And so for us, what we found is we ended up breaking up when we were young. You know, in our early 20s. And we pursued Jesus separately. And we fell in love with Jesus. And that didn't mean that our life was flipped upside down right away and that everything was perfect and walking, you know, I don't know. I was going to say walking on clouds. I don't know if that's even a thing. Yeah. Rainbows and sunshine and butterflies and oh my. No, that's
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, that's different reference. Anyways, we still had issues to work through.
Right.
But the thing is that we now realize that our relationship wasn't dependent on you and it wasn't depending on me. We were depending on God. And so therefore we could be independent for that time and grow with him. And then he brought us back together.
Yeah. It immediately changed our hearts so that our character and our emotions and everything else would kind of follow suit.
Yep.
And we kind of had that change of heart. Like if you're not a believer, that was the main thing for us. We can talk about these things all day long of what to do, what not to do, and all the things in between. Yep. But when your heart's not right, like nothing's going to work.
Yes.
And we believe that Jesus can change your heart in a second.
Yes.
Like in a second. And so that's kind of where we're coming from here.
Yep. So he is the foundation of and I tell my daughter this. So Gwen usually wakes up pretty early and she'll see me reading and praying. And I always tell her, the reason I do this is because without Jesus, I don't know how to love mommy and I don't know how to love you and Kara and Vivi. Like I want her to know from this young age, everything everything is dependent on God.
Yep.
We have to have him as our foundation. And we try to bring that in with everything. Like the reason that we're blessed and we each have a bed to sleep in is because of God. The reason that daddy has a job is because of God. The reason that we have food on the table is because of God. The reason that you and I have a relationship like the way we do now is because of God. And it's not, and I don't mean this in a bad way because I love prayer. Like I'm really trying to up my prayer game. But if you're saying that you're only like praying and worshiping, but not reading his word, you're going to miss his word.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. I've had people that told me that they've prayed and they felt like God spoke to them to get a divorce. It's like, okay, well, what does the Bible actually say? Because God's not going to say something to you differently than what he's already had someone write down.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Now, again, there's biblical grounds for divorce, you know, when there's abuse, you know, but for what this person was saying, I'm like, that's not biblical ground. You know, this is a feeling that you have. It's not God speaking to you. Right. So to have a strong, I guess, time with God, you know, in the Bible and getting to know his heart. And I would just give some tips out there for you because some people are going to be like, it's intimidating. I get it.
It really is.
I mean, sometimes people think it's just like a normal book and they're going to start at the beginning and read to the end.
Don't do that.
No, you're going to get to Leviticus and want to kill yourself. You're going to be like, this doesn't make any sense. This does not apply to me and my marriage. Joe and Chrissy are crazy. What are they talking about? But if you download right now on your phone, because you're listening to a podcast, the Bible app, YouVersion Bible app, just search that in your app store, whatever Google's called. And you can download it and then you can search a reading plan and just search marriage. Find a marriage reading plan. There's probably one by Craig and Amy Groeschel on there because they created the Bible app. Yep. And there's just all kinds of good ones from Jimmy Evans, Craig and Amy, Andy Stanley, Pastor Dave and Vanessa. I'm sure they have one on there by now. But just search for a reading plan.
Yeah.
Because again, we talked about this last week. It's an investment. Yep. You know, spending time with God, reading his word, reading out of the Bible is an investment. And if you don't know where to start, get a reading plan because it'll give you stuff to do in your marriage. Plus, it'll give you a little scripture for you to hold on to for the day.
Yeah, because here's the deal. If you can't understand the unconditional love, grace, forgiveness, mercy, and all these things that God provides to you, there's no way that you can ever give it. You can't give something that you've never comprehended or have been given or understand. And so the more that you get to know him, the more you're able to give it to your spouse.
It's so true.
So B, Bible.
Yep. A.
Attitude. I talk about it a lot. I think it's really important. But as you are in your marriage, I feel like through the hectic times, through kids, through job changes, through finances, through all of the things, we somehow lose our manners in our marriage. You know, we talk nicer to a waitress out to dinner than we do our spouse at home sometimes. And so we have to really keep our attitude in check in how we are communicating with our spouse. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be mad. I'm not saying never have those arguments, but the way that you communicate is important. Yeah. And having a bad attitude in an argument, there's no excuse for it. Yeah. If you need to take time, take time. Yep. No more than 24 hours is my rule. Yeah. Quote unquote rule. I have my fingers up. But there is no excuse to talk rude to your spouse. Like, you need to get that right, first of all. And I think that comes back again. The basics are a foundation, right? So B, Bible, right? If you don't see the way that Jesus was talking to his disciples when he was coaching them, training them, when Paul's writing letters and he's always saying how he's praying for the Galatians or he's praying for the Ephesians, like he loves them, right? Yeah. Like there's so much respect in that, the way that they're talking to one another. Well, even when he came to the crowds, like, I'm really trying to study this and get it a part of my life. Like, you know, John the Baptist just died. He's his really good friend and cousin. Right. Jesus' cousin. Yeah, Jesus' cousin. He just died. And so Jesus tries to go be secluded and be alone with the Father. He gets on a boat. He gets back off the boat. And guess who's there? The crowd. 5,000 people. And he looks at them and he has compassion. I would have been ticked. Right. You'd have had an attitude. I am trying to get away. Like, give me a minute. Yep. My best friend just died and you're thinking all about you. That's my attitude. Yep. But he looked at them and he had compassion. Yep. And so I think that we need to get that right in our own hearts. Like, that's what I have it in my phone, like, every day. It goes off and it says, am I being compassionate? And I'm like, probably not. And so it's just something that I'm trying to like create a habit in, is like, what's going on around me? Mainly it's my children. Am I being compassionate towards them?
Yeah.
But it applies to your spouse. So
something I love, Pastor Vanessa taught this today in staff. She said, like, whenever you are having that issue with someone, your attitude is wrong, you're frustrated, ask yourself and write this down. Why am I frustrated? Like, what's going on right now? Is it me? Is it something that I'm receiving? Is it something they're saying? Because you really need to understand what's going on because if not, you're just going to spew on the person.
Oh, yeah.
You're just going to attack them instead of knowing, okay, the reason that I'm frustrated is because I make dinner every night at this time and they are always late,
Right.
Because instead you're just going to stop making dinner. You're going to throw the plate at them or something crazy,
Yeah.
And again, that's very basic and generic, but you need to write down whatever you're frustrated about. And then even asking yourself, how often am I frustrated about this same issue? Is this reoccurring? Because if it's not reoccurring, if
It's a one-time thing.
Right.
Like, get over it.
Yes.
You're an adult.
Nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect.
We're all going to make mistakes. So that's definitely something to be aware of, is your attitude. And again, like, pray about it. God, help me with this attitude because I know I have one towards Chrissy right now. I know I'm annoyed by my kids right now because I just want to spend time with Chrissy. Like, that's a daily prayer of mine. But just trying to figure out, like going to our Heavenly Father and saying, you've given me your Holy Spirit to live inside me. Help me look like you, God. Because right now I am looking like myself. And Pastor Vanessa even said this today, like the Bible, it talks about that we need to take up our cross daily. We need to die to ourselves. Dying isn't comfortable, like it's such a pretty thing to talk about, like, take up your cross, and I bought my cross necklace on. Like, the cross was a way to brutally kill someone 2,000. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that is insane. So when we're saying that, there's going to be times when you're upset with your spouse, when you're mad at them, when you have an attitude, but we have to die to ourselves and say, okay. And I love what you said earlier about, again, knowing God and the Bible. But to know true grace, we have to spend time with him. Yep. And then when we are knowing grace, we can work that in with our attitude and say, man, this might be the fourth time they did it. I'm going to wait, like you said, 24 hours. I'm going to talk to them tomorrow when I'm not so upset, but nobody's perfect. I mess up all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. And we are talking about me. No, we're talking about me.
I was saying it.
No, it's cool. Okay. So that's B and A. S is probably one of your favorites. Go ahead.
Sex.
You got all excited. It's very
important. I think I just think as a whole, back to the basics, the whole theme of it is, what did you do in the beginning that you were so passionate about with your spouse? You loved them and you had the best attitude. They could do no wrong. Mm-hmm. Like, what would happen if you had that whole attitude throughout your whole marriage? Right. That your spouse could do no wrong. What happens if you were having sex like you were when you were first married? Yeah. That intimacy, that just love for each other, that passion for each other. Frequency. Like, it's so important. We hear people where they're like, they can't even remember the last time they had sex. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's your problem. Right. It just brings you back to each other. Mm-hmm. And when you are able to, it's spiritual. Oh, like, for sure. The Bible talks about that it's spiritual and there's soul ties. And if you had sex outside of marriage, like, you understand that. Yep. Like, you might not be able to put words to it, but you feel it. And so it's very important. Yep. It keeps you guys close together. It is the one thing that nobody outside of, you and your spouse can provide for your spouse. Yep. That is so Joe's love language is words of affirmation. He can get words of affirmation from everybody. And that's socially acceptable. Yep. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to get jealous. It's no thing. You could, I'm trying to think of, somebody could come clean my house. Please come clean my house. Somebody could babysit my kids. You know what I'm saying? There are certain things that people can do for you and your spouse. Yep. But this is the one thing that cannot be substituted. Yep. And it is your job. Is it a job? You know what? I'm going to say it. Sometimes it's a job, guys. When you're pregnant and about to have a baby in 2 weeks, it's a job.
It was definitely a job.
It was strictly business.
It was. We had a lot of business meetings.
We had a lot of business meetings. So sometimes it's a job. Yep. But most of the time, it's not.
I know. I love it.
Sex.
Yes. Just to go off of that, I think that sometimes women don't understand what it means to a man to have sex, mm-hmm. because the Bible even talks about that They were naked, the two, Adam and Eve, first in the garden, and they were unashamed. Because like how you just said, if you have sex outside of marriage, it's not like that, you know, like there's shame in it, you know, like it's like, you're not just, I don't know, like when you and I are alone and like, there's no,
don't get into details.
I know.
Too many details. Calm down.
But I just mean there's no shame.
Right.
You know, and like to experience that
with only one person.
Exactly. Like that is a beautiful thing. And again, like
now you're getting all weird about it.
I'm just trying to get some women out there and be like, I'm going to have sex with my husband tonight. You're welcome, man. You're welcome, man.
Welcome. Let's move on.
Okay.
You be here all night.
I know. You're the one who talks most about it.
Anyways.
Pervert.
Which is linked to our S, but it's intimacy.
Yep.
And it is those moments where it's non-sexual touching. I mean, not even sex at all, but it's that intimacy of getting to know your spouse. That can include a date night, just the two of you. That could include, I mean, it could include your kids, and you could be doing something as a family and really getting to know each other or learning something new together. But it's that intimacy and that vulnerability that you have with just your spouse.
Yep. My brother shared with me before, Dr. Ryan Angelo, he said before that Andy Stanley, who's another pastor out there, he's got great resources on marriage. Check it out. He said, intimacy is into me see. And it is that you want your spouse to know you. Yeah, I see you, boo.
I see you, boo-boo.
You know what I mean? Like, I want you to know all of me. I don't want to be hiding anything from you. I want to be able to share these things with you. The things I'm excited about, the things that I'm nervous about, things I'm scared about, things I'm passionate about. Like, that's intimacy. Like, I'm not sharing that with anyone else.
Right.
You know, not even a best friend. Like, this is you and me. It's that special intimacy.
Yeah, and it's not even that you won't share it with somebody else, but I am the first one that you will share it with.
Yep.
You know, talking things out, whether it's, you know, plans for our kids, plans for our future, whatever the case may be, passions that we have, things that we want to build together as a family that we want to, you know, just build upon. And so I just don't want people to think like you can't tell anybody this, but
it's a secret.
But it starts here.
Yes. But intimacy takes work.
Yeah.
Because a lot of guys miss intimacy because it's what a wife wants most, but a man wants sex most. Both of them are a form of intimacy, but a man has to understand that he's not going to get the sex if he's not fulfilling how his wife wants intimacy. She wants to connect on that level, where a man's intimacy is connecting sexually, you know?
I think that something really important for intimacy out there, just some things I've seen or things that we've even experienced where I feel like as a woman, intimacy is something where I can come to you, I can bring something to you, whether it's a passion, a fear, whatever it may be, but I need to be able to trust you.
Yeah, that's good.
I don't want you to laugh at me.
Yep.
I definitely don't want you to tell any of your friends without my permission. You know what I'm saying? And that takes time, especially if it's been broken.
Yeah.
Whether it's been physical, emotionally, financially, like all of it, it doesn't matter. Intimacy has to be built if there's been a lack of trust.
Yep.
And so if that's the case, and Joe and I have talked about it before where like he just said he's cheated on me before. Like there was a lot of rebuilding before we could actually get married and start a really good relationship. And it took time, but it also took intimacy.
Yep.
I had to communicate those things that I needed from him, and he didn't say, well, that's stupid. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Or laughing at me, or did you hear what she said? You know, it took trust and it took time. And if that's where you're at, go back and listen to that podcast that we had about building trust back up.
Yep. And I think that ties really well in again with the next one. So is communication, because a lot of guys out there, you need to ask your spouse, how can I be more intimate with you? Because they're not going to be like, oh, have more sex with me. Like, that's not, again, that's the man's thoughts. Like, how can I be more intimate with you? You know, it's like, I just want us to sit on the couch and I want us to talk. Or I want us to go through a book in the Bible together, you know, or like how you just said, I want to share things with you and then you just keep it between us. You know, I want you to actually pray for me at night, you know, like, because you can't read your spouse's thoughts.
Right.
And so you have to communicate.
I feel like we talk a lot about communication with couples in like counseling, premarital counseling or whatever. And I feel like it's very superficial at first.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your schedule, which is important. You need to communicate schedule so you're not late and all this kind of stuff. That's very important. But it's those things.
Yeah.
It's those very personal, intimate things that you're communicating with your spouse, because we've talked about this before. You are reading your spouse as a book for the rest of your life.
Yep.
Listen, I just read a book called Redeeming Love, and it was literally 500 pages. I've never read 500 pages consecutively. I've probably read 500 pages. But it took me 2 days to read that mug.
You flew.
I ignored my family for 24 hours.
One Friday, it's like I saw her
Friday,
at night.
Saturday.
I was like, oh, hey, good to see you.
But I read that book with such determination, and I didn't want to miss a word, and I couldn't wait to turn the next page. And I think it's so important that we are reading our spouses like that for the rest of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We are constantly changing as women, but men do too.
Yep.
Your love language might be different in 10 years when your kids are out of the house, or you're just going to be in different phases. And so if you don't get on that habit
Yep.
of constantly reading your spouse and wanting to get to know them and trying to be intimate and learning and doing all that stuff, you're not going to do it in 10 years when your kids are gone.
Right.
That's when the empty nest syndrome,
Yes.
whatever it's called,
Yep.
happens.
That's so true. And some of you guys out there might be like, well, I don't know what to ask her to try to understand.
Google it.
100%. The other day I was on a date with Gwen, my 5-year-old, and I was Googling questions to ask a 5-year-old. Because I'm like, I don't know exactly everything to talk about. Because if it was up to her to lead the conversation, we'd be talking about Barbies and donuts the whole time. And so I just Googled stuff. And you know what? It was a great conversation that we were having. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't over weird it, don't be over spiritualized and think oh, it wasn't an honest question, it didn't come from me,
Yeah.
well, because you're being lazy and you don't know how to think of a question, so Google it,
Right.
and get your brain working.
Yeah, and as a wife, if your spouse is doing that, if they're looking things up, or you think that their heart isn't behind it, their heart is behind it.
They're
because
trying.
They're
trying.
It's not. It doesn't come natural to everybody.
No.
Nobody's like this.
Well, that's the thing with romantic movies, because
They'll get
because they make every woman think that men are supposed to be like
Here's
this.
the thing. If you were the man in those romantic movies, I would look at you like you were weak.
Right.
And like some sort of pansy, and I would hate it.
Right. Because
That's not reality.
not at all. Because you know what they do? They make those men they womanize those men. They make them more like women than an actual man.
And you're not.
And it's not true. I love Age of Adeline, but I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
No.
You're not bringing me flowers that are just names of books that are called flowers, and that was creative.
That was creative. Anyways, moving on.
Watch that movie. It's so good.
Age of Adeline is fantastic. Or The Notebook, But the great thing about romantic movies, I'll tell you this.
I know what's coming.
Everybody out there knows what's coming. We'll move on.
Okay.
S is selflessness.
Yeah, our last S in basics is selflessness. I think it's the hardest one.
It is.
It is naturally in us to be selfish, to always think about what we want, what we need, how it's not fair, all the stuff.
And it goes back to, again, the garden with Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
They were selfish. They wanted the fruit because they wanted to be like God. They got caught. They sinned. And so what happened? Because they were still selfish and they didn't want to get in trouble, they played the blame game.
Yep.
The man blamed the wife blamed the snake. And that's what we've inherited.
Yep.
And so we want to blame other people, or we just want to, well, this is what I want. This is what I want. This is what I want. And you know who says I want a lot? A 2-year-old named Vivi. We shouldn't be like our 2-year-old Vivi, we should have a mature marriage that, again, I'm dying to myself and what I want because I want to serve you. Mm-hmm. And we counseled a couple last week, and they were even saying well, I've tried this, and this, and this, and then it doesn't work. So I just back off. Mm-hmm. It's that's when you don't back off.
No.
Because you're not serving them to get anything.
Right.
You're serving them to give up everything.
That's it. You made a covenant before God that this is what you're in weakness, all the things. I can't even think of them.
All the things.
I don't remember my vows.
I know.
But I'm doing them.
Yep.
Not all the time and not perfectly, but that's my mindset behind it. How can I serve you? How can I make your day easier? How can I do these things? When you screw up, I give grace. It's not about me.
Yep.
It's about we and how can we advance this unit as a family to the next level, which goes back to our last podcast about vision.
Yep. So you can go back and listen to that. But I think even how you just said, you don't even remember all of the what are the vows? Thank you.
What are those things called that you say in front of the pastor?
Right. Is that promises aren't as important as practices.
Yeah.
Because I can promise you the world,
Yep.
but what I'm practicing to give you, that's what matters.
Exactly.
And so you might have written your own vows, and they might have been killer.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not practicing selflessness, those vows, no matter how poetic, no matter how beautiful, no matter if other people have taken your vows and they're reciting them at their own wedding because they were so powerful, if you're not practicing selflessness, that's all out the window.
Yep. That's it.
That's it. That's all I got to say. Mic drop.
We can't drop our mics because they're attached to the table. I can hit it.
Perfect. All right. I'm Joe.
And I'm Chrissy.
And this is The Married Life.
And we believe that it's never too early or too late to have an awesome marriage.
We'll see you guys next time.